Greetings all. My name is Carman Moore. I'm an American composer, and it is my pleasure to welcome you as host of the first of 3 virtual events in the Capo Chamber Players' new series, Musical Offerings for Human Rights. The title of tonight's event is Hearing the African American Experience. I must laud the Capo Chamber Players, who is coming upon its 50th anniversary of presenting widely diversified chamber music that honors all manner of world cultures, one of which, as I mentioned, is the African American experience.
Thank you so much, Carmen. We're thrilled. We're really thrilled. First of all, I want to thank all of you who are listening and welcome you. We're so glad you could join. And Carmen, thank you for this lovely introduction. I'm Patricia Spencer, of the flutist of the Capo Chamber Players, and I just want to say that we are thrilled that Carman Moore has agreed to host this event. He has been commissioned and premiered by the New York Philharmonic. In the 1960s, he wrote the first new music column for the Village Voice. He has been played very happily by the Capo Chamber Players. We're very thrilled to have played his works. And in a later decade, he founded the Society of Black Composers. And most recently, on April 18th, his new double bass solo piece, Stallion, was premiered by Robert Black on the Bang on a Can streamed marathon. Thank you, Carmen.
Absolute pleasure, Pat. Also, we need to share with you 2 wonderful composers, both named David Sanford and David Rakowski. David Sanford will help us to really hear the work by Wendell Logan called Renegade, which refers to the whole business of chasing down slaves during the slavery period. And you will hear the wonders of how this piece connects with that awful stretch in American history. David Sanford is a composer whose works have been performed by the Boston Modern Orchestra Project, the Berkeley Symphony Orchestra, and the Chamber Music Society of Lincoln Center. His honors include the Rome Prize and fellowships from the Guggenheim Foundation and the Radcliffe Institute. He is the Elizabeth T. Kennan Professor of Music at Mount Holyoke College. His new big band album, Prayer for Lester Bowie, featuring Hugh Reagan, will be released on Greenleaf Music this September. So we are most fortunate to have David Sanford and this wonderful piece of music, Renegade. David?
Thank you very much, Carmen. It was my good fortune to have met Wendell Logan at the American Academy of Arts and Letters when he was the recipient of the Vladimir and Rhoda Lakin Award in 1998. He began teaching at Oberlin College in 1973 and initiated the programs in jazz and African American music studies there at a time when conservatories of that caliber rarely offered jazz performance theory or history courses. I initially knew of him as a composer, but he also excelled as a teacher. A friend of mine who graduated from the conservatory at Oberlin assured me that he was one of the most influential and respected teachers at that institution. And his rigorous exercises in ear training and rhythmic memory and performance are legendary. Regarding his music, the ideologies of both classical and jazz traditions and the innovations of both inform his creative work, and he effectively balances the values and influences of each without compromise. His works acknowledge 20th century currents in both genres without forcibly referencing one or the other, which expertly embodies the very ideal of Gunther Schuller's conception of a third stream, and all of which you will hear in Wendell Logan's Renegade.
Runs, falls, rises, stumbles on from darkness, and darkness thicketeth with shapes of terror, and the hunters pursuing, and the hounds pursuing, and the night cold, and the night long, and the river to cross, and the jackman lanterns beckoning, and blackness ahead, and when shall I reach that somewhere morning, and keep on going, and never turn back, and keep on going, keep on going, keep on going, keep on going, keep on going. Renegade. Rise and go beneath the crossing crossing over. Oh, mythic star-shaped Bible city. Some hoping and some rejoicing, some in coffins and some in carriages, some in silks and some in shackles. Rise, rise, and go, fare ye well, fare ye well, fare ye If you see my Pompeii, 30 years of age, new breeches, plain stockings, Negro shoes. If you see my Anna, likely young mulatto, branded E on the right cheek, on the left. Catch them if you can and notify subscribers. Catch them if you can, but it won't be easy. They'll dart underground when you try to catch them. Plunge into quicksand, whirlpools. When you try to catch them.
What a marvelous piece of music. That's Wendell Logan's Runagate, Renegade. We'd love to have David Sanford join us with his information and his experience with Wendell and this piece of music. What can you tell us, David?
Well, it's really it's a composition that demands virtuosity from its tenor soloist, its accompanying musicians, and its conductor. Not that this quality in and of itself adds or subtracts from the work, but this merely suggests that if it's not readily apparent, we're hearing elite musicians, and that we should recognize them as such. So, very hearty bravo for this performance to the Capo Chamber Players. Their conductor, Parris, and the exceptionally moving tenor soloist, Robert Mack.
Yeah.
The power of the piece goes much deeper than merely its dialectic combination of musical genres. At its heart, really, is that text, which is the historical poem of the same name by Robert Hayden, which refers to an escaped slave or multiple escaped slaves, and really encompasses a number of different viewpoints, including that of Harriet Tubman and those around Tubman, and other voices working toward freedom, some not working towards freedom. But I think the piece gains a great deal of dramatic and emotional strength through the very expressive elements in Logan's vocal writing, which we hear distinctively blues and gospel influenced melodic lines. They're tonal with very ornamentation that suggests an African-American musical vernacular. But again, placed within an expressionistic harmonic and timbral framework with of high virtuosic brilliance. Again, it's a very difficult tenor part and very difficult musical part, and putting it all together, it's a very impressive achievement. But it really gives it a power, I think, just that juxtaposition of the universes, and again, really just the expressivity of those lines themselves.
Yes.
Thank you, David. You've answered one of my questions that I had. It seems to me that actually Wendell Logan sets things up so that it builds and builds and builds, and we feel, for instance, he does this again and again. We feel something a little different each time, but we feel the tenor, the terror of the hunted slave from the tenor part. We feel the terror, and then following that, he climaxes on something that just floats, and we feel the strength where he's saying, no more auction block, or before I'll be a slave, I'll be buried in my grave. And the strength of that floating, unbelievable musical climax, which is higher and slower than all the terror that we just heard. The strength is just incredible. I don't know how he does that. Maybe you can tell us how he does it.
I think he's really taking his cue from the poet Robert Hayden, and I think other composers historically, where he's utilizing different characters. So you have the escaped slave at the beginning, who's obviously in great, terror and trepidation, very fearful. And at some point, you have that, keep going, and eventually it's talking about freedom, and it's it's a real belief and a real faith that's keeping these many different characters going. And in that way, it's kind of utilizing different characters and their voices to give different perspectives and widely varying moods, which I think is kind of in its own way. I mean, obviously, I can't compare it to Earl King by Schubert, but it does have the kind of the multiple characters with different viewpoints. So it's asking its singer, which is just a single voice, to play a wide variety of roles, and that singer, which Mack distinctively and expertly does. He really gives voice and to these many different characters, the same way that somebody reading fiction on, I shouldn't compare it to fiction on tape, but just that ability to take on a number of different voices. Obviously, I think we'll say Schubert predated the book on tape, but also Schoenberg's Survivor from Warsaw, I think the same thing. So there's kind of a postmodern sensibility of shifting tenses and rapidly transforming sound environments. But again, there's sort of nothing ironic or removed in this work. I mean, the voices are directly those of the characters given in Haydn's poem. So we're getting it directly, even though, nowadays we tend to think postmodern means ironic or some kind of remove. It's a very direct and very powerful experience.
Yeah, well, really well said. I'm really impressed by the fact that he dares to keep repeating some of these lines. It's like, go on, yeah. It's the way it would happen in real life, not the way it would happen in a piece of music. And, it goes past, it keeps spilling outside the piece of music, and it almost becomes a theater piece at a certain point. It's not just a piece of music. It is also a piece of music. So I'm very, very impressed with that. And he presses the tenor, and the tenor has to really go get some notes, So, it's almost like we feel the stretch to like get through this piece is part of the thing that he achieves with this wonderful score.
I'm loving the spoken word parts to this, which I
Yeah,
think,
right. For example, yes.
yeah, I mean, there are pieces, where there's Lincoln Portrait and, Schumann's Manfred back in the 19th century, there are examples of this, but, in his context, obviously this is a black voice. In many respects, this is 1980 where, we're just one
Rap,
year less. Yeah, rap is not even a popular genre yet. It's a,
right. It was supposed to be gone by now. Right.
yes. No, it was an oddity. I mean, Sugar Hill Gang was,
Well,
all of 79, and then all of a sudden there's this. So,
yeah.
it was kind of ahead of his time.
Yeah, and also the bring together of jazz and classical, which I suspect every American composer for 150 years has realized that don't whether it's called jazz or whatever, that we are supposed to create a new possibility between a formal music and music of the people, and so when I was saying that he broadens it out to make the form bigger than just a piece of music, there's also that.
David, I wanted to ask you, there's, specifically for the instruments, some of our music is completely notated, right? And there are other places where we have just little cells that we repeat. So, things are stacked up, but it's not specific as to the, you do however many times it takes for the singer to get through the text or whatever. And I know that you yourself have feet in different traditions and different camps, and I thought maybe you could just say something about sort of the choice of when to do that. I mean, here it seems like sometimes it's about Logan giving the tenor a certain amount of freedom that we are doing these things, and it's a little bit open, right? So he has some flexibility with the timing he wants to take and so forth. But you could just say something about, situations when that kind of texture, or when a little more improvisatory thing like that. When do you choose to do it? How do you choose when that's necessary?
I think every piece probably has its own logic that suggests itself. It's interesting that I think that improvisational tradition in concert music, I mean, I'm going back to Earl Brown. I can remember, seeing a lot of music like that in the 60s and, well, not so much in the 60s. I wasn't reading anything in the 60s, but, probably from that era, certainly in the 70s. But on the other side of it, I'm certainly thinking of, in the jazz realm, certainly the conductions of Butch Morris work on that same principle, where you have figures that, and a lot of the dimensions are controlled by the conductor in the moment. And, I think improvisation, I mean, obviously people go back to Mozart, and Beethoven for improvisation in certain respects, but this where it's elastic and the entire ensemble has some kind of, I'm not sure how much autonomy, but certainly the conductor and the soloist have a certain amount of autonomy, and each performance shapes the piece itself. I think that's something, and that might be coming from Logan. I would wonder really, is that his jazz sensibility coming, from a side that, was certainly aware of, the African American groups, like the AACM coming out of Chicago, or again, was that, the modern, the Pendereskis and that crowd, or even George Crumbs, who are, using those boxes and repetitions and, kind of elastic, time senses for their own, similar ends about how much, each performance controls its own shape and parameters.
Probably both. Yeah. A couple of things I just thought of. One is Renegade is shouting. That is also saying renegade. It's sort of it's like saying something awful about whoever's escaping, and go get this guy's a renegade, you know. So renegade, I suspect is from that. I should also mention that Wendell Logan very graciously performed a piece of mine that was dedicated to Martin Luther King after his death. It was several years from that, but a work called Drum Major, and quotes Martin Luther King's last sermon, in which he said, and if you want to say that I was a drum major, say I'm a drum major for peace, a drummer major for righteousness. So Wendell and his musicians performed that at Oberlin back in the day. So sort of creates a whole circle here.
Fantastic. David Sanford, thank you so much. Thank you, Carmen. Thank you, David. Thank you, Steve. David Sanford, your insights have been just wonderful. You bring such a breadth of references, all the blues and jazz and so many other references. I can't wait to watch this program myself and to try to take in everything instead of trying to worry about whether I might have to say something. But in addition to bringing in all of these wonderful other threads, you've also given us a really wonderful picture of the emotional impact. And I think that's just incredible. That's one of the strongest things about the piece. And I thank you so much for helping us with it. Thank you.
And we would also like to thank you, Pat, and your wonderful organization for their openness to music of African American composers. There have been so many years in which that, we have been, and our works have been ignored in a way, and not appreciated as authentically part of American music. And you have always been at the forefront of realizing how important it is to have not just African American a musical experience as part of the chamber group's work, but also of all kinds of cultures. Having heard that powerful and wonderful piece of music, we are now ready to hear another powerful and wonderful piece of music, Luciano Berio's wonderful O King. This is a very special piece for me because Luciano Berio was my teacher also at Juilliard, and became a good friend of mine. And as a result, at the time of Martin Luther King's being killed, murdered, yes. After that, Luciano Berio wrote O King. And he not only wrote it, but my son, Martin Moore, was born that very year. And we named him obviously Martin Moore because of Martin Luther King. And and Luciano dedicated this work officially to Martin Moore and of course, his generation. So let us meet David Rakowski, who is going to help us really dig into O King. I should just say by introduction that David Rakowski studied with Berio at Tanglewood in 1982 and wrote about O King in his dissertation. Among David's awards are a Rome Prize and the Steger Prize from Chamber Music Society of Lincoln Center. He is a Walter Naumburg Professor of Composition at Brandeis University, and he is a member of the American Academy of Arts and Letters. Presenting to you the wonderful composer, David Rakowski.
Thank you, Carmen. This piece, O King, is really one of the iconic chamber music pieces of the 20th century. And when I studied with Berio, I told him how much I liked it. So he gave a public talk about it to composers. And he mostly talked about the technique, but not the reason that it existed. It was a response to the murder of Martin Luther King. And he did it in an interesting way that he had done with a text before. The entire text is only, "Oh, Martin Luther King." And the text is presented first only as the vowels, and then little by little, consonants are added until at the climax, you hear the entire text, "Oh, Martin Luther King." And that was a very interesting way of putting a piece together. It accumulates from just the bits and pieces and turns into the finished product at the end. And I think that is a bit about what Dr. King was trying to do with his work. And so, O King.
Amazing. That is one of my very favorite pieces of all time. So let's ask David Rakowski to give us some more info about it, because he has really studied this piece very, very deeply.
Yeah, thank you, Carmen. Yes, I did write about it in my dissertation, and I did hear Berio give a talk about it. He talked about it for about 45 minutes. And it occurred to me, and it occurs to me now, that when something very earth-shattering, very important happens to which a composer wants to respond, a lot of composers respond by doing something very formal and formalized and trying to extract beauty from that. And this is what Berio did. He reverted to, I'm sorry about this term, medieval iso rhythm. It was a way of writing vocal lines in the medieval period that was, it seems weird to us now, but it was the way they composed back then. Mm-hmm. Berio has a sequence of 21 notes that he repeats 4.5 times. And in those 21 notes are only 7 pitches, and that's for the vocal line. And he furthermore splits each iteration into 3 parts, each of which begin with the first 2 notes that you heard, F and A. That is a very haunting major third. It haunts me at night. And when any of my students write F and A after each other, I just say, "Oh, King, you can't do that." So each of the 3 segments, 4 notes, 7 notes, and 10 notes of the 21 note set starts with the F and the A. So there's a very strong grounding of tonality. And then it seems to sort of flash away from it and come back. Now, while that's going on, 4.5 times, Berio is doing the same thing with the instruments that he's doing with the consonants. First time through, it's just O, A, E, U, E, just the vowels of Martin Luther King's name. And then he starts adding little by little. He adds the pretty soon, and he adds them faster and faster in the 4th iteration. Meanwhile, the instruments are getting a little bit more and more excited because they're playing notes that aren't in that 21 note series. And the harmony is opening up and closing, opening up and closing. And you can speak metaphorically about what that means, but every once in a while, it gets really, really thick, and then suddenly it gets very thin and you hear only 1 note, and then it grows and comes back and so forth. You can apply whatever metaphors you want to that, but what Berio is doing in this piece is saving the big moment. Right. The big moment is the 1 note, a high G, which is much higher than any of the other notes we've heard from the voice, for the climax, which comes close to the end of the piece. And that is where we first hear the text, Luther King. And we've got the name King finally on that high G. Right. And right after that is the first time you hear the entire text by itself as an afterthought. Now, composers are usually pretty good at saving the climax. You know, they don't show their cards before they give you something. It's kind of a surprise, or it's prepared so well that you know it's coming, but you don't know exactly what it's going to be. And then in listening to it in the last couple of weeks, getting ready for this, I noticed that in the 4th iteration, before the voice gets to that high G, the flute comes in on that G and holds it. And I was thinking, why did he do that? Why is he telegraphing where he's going to go? And then this is very close to the end of the 4th of 4.5 iterations. And then I remembered in his last speech, Dr. King said, "I've been to the mountaintop." And perhaps this is the mountaintop that he's been to. And then when we get to the actual word king, we get to see and feel it again also. So that's my sort of metaphorical take on how the whole thing works. It is very, what is nice about it is how it's static and in motion, both at the same time.
Amazing.
Because of, yeah, I know, and again, that F and A, I can bring them up anytime. I don't have perfect pitch, so I suppose if anyone has anything they want to add to this, I mean, Steve, you have to play the piano part, and yeah, it's. Go ahead.
I wondered, David, you'd say a little more about the end after that climactic moment of the G, and then of course the ensemble, except for the pianist, actually they speak those same vowels, right?
Yes.
Kind of coda,
Yes.
and then the voice trails off. I mean, to me, the piece ends very very inconclusively. There's a sort of diminuendo, and everything fades
Yes.
out.
Well, the voice is sustaining the F and then goes down to E flat and D, and that's just where it ends. The thing is, after the climax, there's a bunch of flurries of notes, and then suddenly just chord after chord after chord, while the voice is doing something very simple, sustaining that F on which the piece started, and then just trailing off because that is the way life works, I suppose. Mm-hmm. And he didn't want it to be a big ending, obviously.
Mm-hmm.
Because you know the work of Dr. King continues.
And for me, there is an emotional logic to this thing, which is that what can you say? It's like ineffable what has happened. It's like someone is trying to say this man's name, and is too emotionally wrought to even get it out. It's just the challenge to get that name out is sort of is the motor in this piece. It's just finally, wow, and the relief of getting to that moment where you can actually pronounce this great man's name is part of the thing that makes the piece worth.
Yeah, absolutely.
That's a fabulous comment, Carmen. And David, thank you so much. It's wonderful, very exciting to hear about that. But I'm just thinking, relative to what Carmen is saying, that as the piece progresses, something that I am always aware of is the incredible unity of the voice with the instruments. And you're saying the instruments have different pitches. And I always think of those as being punctuation of this unified line that is continuing. And as Carmen describes it, that's someone trying to say those words. And then it's as if after the climax, even the instrumentalists are able to say the words and to deal with it and to speak their grief, perhaps.
Right.
And also, we should note the fact that these pings are like that bullet that killed him, that killed Dr. King.
Oh yeah.
And and then this sort of quietness after it, and just what can you do, and then bing, I even hear I even hear a rhyme in ping, king.
Ping. Oh yeah.
And it's almost when you get to the Martin Luther King, when you get to King, it's like you've achieved something, And Luciano, there is so much of him. He can describe things in technical terms, but when it gets down to like putting the music on the page or getting the music out, he's all Italian, Here it comes, folks. Get ready.
Great.
But
did Berio ever speak about the fact that the unity of the instruments with the voice? That's such a striking.
Yeah.
When I heard him, he was talking to composers, so it was composer talk.
Uh-huh.
Yeah.
So
it's a striking
yeah.
aspect.
Yeah.
David, thank you so much. These have been wonderful comments, and we
Thank you.
appreciate them very
I'd
much.
just like to add
Thank you.
that there is also a Stravinsky piece relative to the death of Martin Luther King. And
Wow.
when a great man dies, I think W.H. Auden may have done the words. I don't have to look that up.
Wow.
But
Yeah.
there's also, and there were a lot of, you know, the special thing relative to human rights, whatever, to people and world emotion was that the death, almost like COVID, just something awful that pulls everybody together, and everybody got together and mourned. And here's this great Italian composer creating a very, very, very deeply felt. We have to give him that.
Yeah.
Deeply felt this was for him to do that, and certainly I appreciate the fact that he dedicated it to my son. And if you'd like to take a quick look at something, here's the page.
Nice.
You can see that, but to Martin.
Wonderful.
Wonderful.
Wonderful. Wonderful.
There's Luciano's signature below, and this is all written out in his hand. So we were so thankful to him for that. But he obviously was looking for a way to express, you know, his emotion about this thing. So.
Well, thank you all. Thank you both. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Absolutely. And thanks, David Rakowski.
Yes, thank you. Thank you, Carmen.
Yes, and he and I are both former Berio students. So we're way on the inside of this, both of us, yeah. So I suppose we are to wrap this up with a, again, very heartfelt appreciation of the Capo Chamber Players, who are moving forward into the future with the same vigor.
Well, thank you, Carmen, but also thank you so much, David Rakowski. You have given us just a really wonderful insight into this piece and the circumstances around it, and the details, and we're very, very grateful. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you all very much, our listeners, for joining us for these conversations and these incredible pieces. I've been asked to talk a little bit about the curatorial vision. Our vision for this series is, through the power of our repertoire, to help listeners explore cultural differences and build awareness for human rights. Getting closer to a difficult history through music can perhaps help us face it. Music can open up an emotional connection and give us extra strength. In addition, I want to thank a lot of people. We talk about what we have done all the time, our 150 pieces that have been written for us, our trips to Russia where we brought American music to Russian audiences. But we owe a huge thank you to all of our funders. They are listed on the program. You can all see them. I won't name each of them, but I want to thank all of them and say that their faith in us helps make our work possible. There's one funder in particular that I want to mention. We've decided to dedicate this series to Bernard Hulbert, MD. The Hulbert Charitable Trust has given us support for more than 2 decades and has made a significant difference in the scope of what we can offer. We're very honored to extend this dedication to the founder of the trust.
Thanks, Pat. I also want to thank everyone for coming and just mention we have 3 events in this series. This is the first, so there are 2 more. The next one is going to be May 25th at 7 p.m. It's Asian Echoes with music by Chen Ung and Cho Wen Chung. And then the last is June 22nd, also at 7. That's called Paean to Merging Cultures. It focuses on the Native American experience here. And it's music by Valerie Coleman and Kyle Gann. So I hope you can tune in for these.